What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Fresh Finance Podcast. My name is Thomas Elms. I've got my co-host here, Kyle Ryan, as always. And today we are going to do a little bit more of a simpler episode. We think it's timely just because of some of the conversations that Kyle and I have had with clients. But we're going to break down the types of retirement accounts that are available, some of the things that you might see. And one of the main reasons we want to talk about this is we see a lot of people changing jobs, moving into different positions, and because of that, starting to interact with different types of retirement accounts. And this is the one thing that I love and I hate about the finance industry is it seems like there's a million different types of accounts. And so as somebody who's not a financial advisor, sometimes it can just be a daunting task to recognize and understand what the heck all of these different accounts mean and how they're helpful. And so Kyle and I today are just going to kind of break down each account, the pros and cons per se, but primarily just the differences and allowing you guys to recognize those so that when you're in a situation where if you're making a change in your job or you're considering rolling over an account, which we'll talk about later, what the pros and cons are and how that process actually works. So Kyle, would love to just get your take on this conversation before we get started.
Yeah, we wanted to keep it, simple today. Just kind of get some terms out there, some different investment vehicles, define how they work. When you might see them at different employers. Really going to namely, first we're going to hit on the IRAs. We're going to hit on the 401ks, simple IRAs, SEP IRAs, and anything else that kind of falls into place as we go through it.
Yeah, yeah. And before we truly get started into this, the one thing that I did want to mention, just kind of as a preface, is there's two segments that you want to recognize are different. These things are different. Okay. The first thing is you have an account and then you have investments inside of an account. So when we mention a IRA, an individual retirement account, if we mention a 401k, right, that is an account and it is the vehicle that houses all of the contributions and the investments that you make inside of that account. So if you were to hypothetically here, I'm just randomly naming an investment would be like an S&P 500 index fund. Okay. That is an investment inside of the account. And I just want to make sure that that's clear because sometimes people will kind of use those two terminologies in congruence with one another, and they're actually separate things. So just kind of wanted to preface that. So let's talk about IRAs, individual retirement accounts. These are probably the most generic retirement accounts that are out there. And the reason why is because they were kind of the first retirement vehicle that you could really start utilizing. And the perk to the IRA is you can literally set one up almost at any sort of financial institution, whether it's a bank, whether it's what's called a custodian, a place like Fidelity, a place like LPL, where Kyle and I work at. There's so many opportunities as far as your ability to set that account up. And Kyle, would love to just have you kind of walk through the IRA and the difference with that from a tax side to the Roth.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. The one thing I'd want to point out with any of these retirement plans is that they all require what's called earned income, right?
Yep.
You have to be working, right? So if you're retired, you're not yet working, you're in between jobs and you're not showing any income for yourself, your spouse can count, but we're not going to get into that. You need to have earned income on your tax return in order to make any contributions to these accounts. So with that being said, let's talk about an IRA versus a Roth IRA. You can contribute with earned income again into an IRA or a Roth IRA. This year, the limit for that contribution, either account is $6,500. If you are the age of 50 or above, you get an extra $1,000 catch-up contribution. You're actually able to contribute $7,500. But let's talk about how they work from a tax perspective. They are essentially polar opposites of one another. The traditional IRA, also called the pre-tax IRA, and the Roth IRA, total polar opposites. Pay me now or pay me later. The IRA, as you mentioned, the longest standing one of the bunch, is you pay me later, meaning I contribute $5,000 to an IRA today. It means I get a tax deduction today. What is a tax deduction? A tax deduction simply means if I'm making $100,000, I put $5,000 into an IRA, I get to deduct $5,000 from my taxable income, meaning I am not getting taxed on that money today. Mm-hmm. That money in the IRA will grow and grow and grow until it's distributed you will not pay tax until that money is distributed back to you, right? So as soon as it's distributed, it's taxable as if you made it at work. It's taxable as ordinary income. Okay, so that's very important because in retirement, if you're taking that out in retirement, whenever it is, you're going to be taxed on that money eventually. So that's why it's called pay me later. Roth, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It's pay me now. When you get money from your paycheck and it goes to your bank account, taxes are withheld. Money in your bank is already paid taxes on for the most part if you're W-2.
Yep.
Now, if you contribute to a Roth IRA, you're putting after-tax money in there. The one thing you're not going to want to do is ever get double taxed, and that's really not how the tax code works in a lot of circumstances. You're not going to get taxed on the money going into your account and then taxed again putting into the Roth IRA. That money's already been taxed, and therefore it grows tax deferred, meaning I put $5,000 in there today and it grows and grows. I'm never going to get taxed on that growth. And if it comes out and I'm above the age of 59 and a half, I can take out both my earnings and my contributions. I can take out the whole balance tax-free, not
Yep.
like the IRA where it comes, and I have to pay taxes on that income. It's tax-free. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And if you want to elaborate more, Thomas, on the difference of, getting out your contributions versus the earnings for the Roth IRA.
You're reading my mind. So the other nice caveat to having the Roth is you're able to distribute the amount of contributions that you've made tax-free out of a Roth at any time. Now, one of the things that differentiates this as well is with a traditional IRA, if you try to pull contributions out before you reach age 59 and a half, you have to pay the ordinary income tax on the distribution, and you have to pay a 10% penalty. So that's kind of one of the kickers to the IRA, but one of the perks to the Roth is if you need cash and you have no other place to withdraw it from, you can pull earnings out of your Roth IRA. You just want to make sure that you don't pull more than you've contributed in an aggregate basis. So you're totaling out all the contributions you've made to that Roth or really any Roths in comparison. Yep. And so that's the key there. As we transition onto the 401k side, one of the things to recognize is the tax situation between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA work the exact same way as if you have a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k. So you're going to get the pay me now or pay me later in the 401k situation. But this transcends a little bit because this is now what's called an employer-sponsored plan. And there's a couple of benefits. There's a couple of things to kind of consider on the downside. The benefits are the contribution limits are much higher. So people with high income and a lot more cash flow to contribute toward investment accounts, 401k is definitely a possible better option. So Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but through a 401k, the maximum that you can do in this given tax year is $22,500. Yep. If you're over the age of 50, you can do up to 30,000. So that's just kind of showing you that you can almost 4x the amount of contributions that you're making just inside of the 401k. And this is something that we see frequently with people who are just starting out at work, is they're maybe kind of focused more on the IRA or the Roth IRA side because they don't necessarily have as much to contribute in the earlier stages where their salaries are lower. But as they go up, they're in a position where they can contribute even more than in an IRA or a Roth, and they want to go ahead and shift towards that 401k. The other advantage on the 401k side is normally your company is going to provide some sort of a match, right? You're going to get a little bit of free money for contributing. And each company is going to be different on how much they're going to match and what strategy they're going to match. So kind of recognizing how that process works is always helpful. Here's kind of the downside is you're limited a little bit on the investment options that are available. You're essentially kind of held to a standard from whatever the employer sponsored plan allows for. That's kind of the downside on the 401k. Now, in today's day and age, most 401ks provide a pretty comprehensive option on the investments that are available. But if you have your own IRA, you normally kind of have the ultimate flexibility there.
Yep. Yeah. The only thing I'd add that I forgot to mention on the IRA versus the 401k part is the 401k, no matter how much you make, you can contribute to it.
That's true.
The traditional and the Roth IRA, they're actually income limitations, where if you make above a certain amount, and it changes whether you're single or married, and you make above a certain amount, you are not eligible to make contributions to either the traditional IRA and get the deduction, or the Roth IRA at all. So if you make too much money and you're contributing to either of those accounts, the next year you're going to get a letter from the IRS saying you have excess contributions because you weren't able to contribute. So wanted to add that caveat, but you covered the 401ks really well. As you mentioned, one of the few downsides I see in a 401k is simply, like you mentioned, the investment options. Downside, so it is a downside. You always want flexibility, but the reason for that is because, again, 401ks are protected. There are laws in place in which protect the participants in a 401k. And one of the ways in which they protect people is by limiting the amount of investments they have. There's the person who's running the 401k has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the funds available to you are, they're prudently, looked after. Someone's gone through and made sure that there's a good management team, that everything is in place for you not to be taking a speculative investment with your retirement account.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll see much more vanilla funds in there per se, than you would have available to you in an IRA.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'd comment on the 401k is, depending on your employer, some employers don't even have the Roth 401k available. So that's always something you want to check in on. You can always look at your summary plan description if you want a nice long read, figure out how your plan works.
What we're here for.
That's right. That's what we're here for. Your financial advisor will do that for you. But also, some plans will also allow for after-tax contributions. So you can get up to $30,000 if you're above 50 or 50 and above. But you're actually able to get a lot more than that if your plan allows for it. So you can actually get up to like $66,000 roughly in there. But that also takes into account not only your contributions, but your employer match. If I'm making 200 grand and I'm 50 years old and I put in 30 grand and I'm getting a 10% match, they're matching 20 grand. I'm at 50,000 total contributed between me and my employer. I can still hypothetically, if my plan allows for it, get another 16 in there via after-tax contributions, which are not deductible. They don't work like the Roth. We won't get too much into that, but wanted to cover that piece too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality too is kind of having a conversation of, if you have a 401k at a job, I would say the traditional route is most people just go ahead and roll that over into either an IRA or a Roth. There's a lot of benefits to that. There are some downsides that we don't need to go into today, but there's also a lot of perks in just transitioning that 401k into your new employer plan as well. So that's just kind of a thought that we wanted to kind of consider in the conversation, because a lot of people are switching jobs, are getting laid off. We're kind of entering into that recessionary conversation here once again in the economy, and it's definitely worth noting.
And Thomas, don't forget the financial institution's favorite option. You could always annuitize it.
Yeah, I would definitely consider talking with a tax person and with a financial advisor before doing that option, because that really it is insane to see over the last 5 years how much the annuitization option, which, just to kind of explain what we're talking about here is, and if you look on your 401k website, I'm sure you can probably see this option, but they will project out at retirement how much income they could provide you each month based off of your account value. That's essentially an annuitizing your retirement. And let's just not even go into that today.
Yeah,
it's just too much of a rabbit hole.
I like how you did before. Just speak with a financial advisor if you're considering.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. So kind of moving on from the 401ks, let's talk about simple IRAs. And I'll let you kind of walk through this one, but basically this is what I call the small businesses 401k. It's primarily utilized for businesses that have less than 100 employees. And there's a little bit of a caveat, a couple differences than a 401k.
Yeah, so your contributions are different. So your contribution limit, if you're under 50, again, is 15,500. You get a catch up of 3,500. So if you're 50 plus, you can actually contribute $19,000 in there. There's slightly different rules that apply. So like if you take money out of any other retirement plan before age 59 and a half, you get a 10% early withdrawal penalty above and beyond your taxes. With a simple, it's actually a little bit more penalizing. If you take money out of a simple IRA in the first 2 years, there's a 25% withdrawal penalty. So another downside, but similar to any other IRA, your investment options are just the same as they would be in a traditional IRA, Roth IRA. They are ERISA covered plans. So, you still have these employee protections and employer protections within the plan, as according to the ERISA laws. But other than that, like you mentioned, it's meant for small offices, right? So 100 or less employees. You have to give out a match. Okay. Now you have to give either at least a 3% match to everyone who's contributing to the plan, your employees, or you have to give a 2% match to everyone, whether they're contributing or not.
Yeah.
So those are really the slight differences. I don't know if you have any more to add.
No, it's really just the small businesses 401k.
Yeah.
It's a little bit simpler to manage. It's a little bit cheaper to set up. And it's really just kind of like a secondary option if somebody doesn't want to fully set up a 401k plan. Um,
Yes. I'm
we're
glad you
kind of
said
seeing them
simple.
dwindle away a little bit, I would say.
I have seen the popularity fade. It always depends on your individual circumstance, whether it works out for you. But I like how you said it is simple. There's a reason that the acronym for it is simple. It's
Yeah.
very cost efficient to set up. It is a very straightforward account to set up, much like the SEP IRA. And as a good transition in the SEP IRA, there are laws that have been passed at the end of last year, Secure 2.0, that introduced the pathway to making a Roth simple IRA and a Roth SEP IRA.
Yeah.
We don't want to go into those too much, but they work just the same as any traditional versus Roth IRA would. And they're supposed to be out, but the plan administrators have to provide the paperwork, and the IRS has to get through the tax codes and everything on it. But that's going to be out there in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And on the SEP side, this is primarily utilized for solo entrepreneurs. It's also something I'm seeing with smaller organizations as well. What I've noticed is normally it's like 15 or less people. If I see it used at all, this is something that's kind of like fading away as well, especially because solo 401k plans have been introduced over the last, 10, 15 years.
Yep. Yep.
But really it's a platform to treat it like a traditional IRA, or as you talked about in the future here as a Roth IRA, but it allows you to defer, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but allows you to defer up to 20% of your compensation into that. Now, one of the kickers is for each percentage of your income that you're deferring to this account, if you have employees, you have to defer the same amount. And so this sometimes becomes a tough vehicle to actually contribute to if you have employees, because you have to match what you're putting towards yourself towards everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest kicker for the SEP IRA for people that have multiple employees.
Yeah, I like looking at it as like the family office plan,
Yeah.
because hypothetically, Thomas and I, we have a business, and I want to contribute. Say we both make 100 grand, and let's say Thomas owns it. I'm the employee. Thomas makes 100 grand. I make 50 grand. He wants to put 20% of his salary in for himself. He wants to get 20 grand in there. Well, he has to put in 20% for me too. I'm a happy camper
Yeah.
there. He has to
Yeah.
put in an extra 10 grand for me. So the very simple way to look at it is whatever you want to give yourself on a percentage basis, you have to give to everyone. You might love your employees. I don't know if you love them that much.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I'd really be aware of. The SEP can get pretty interesting, especially for business owners, because you can go above and beyond what, like, you can contribute to a Roth or a traditional and then contribute to a SEP IRA on top of that.
Yeah.
So it can be pretty nifty, but like you mentioned, the reason we did these at the end is because alternative options are out there and can be better for some people.
One of the things that I like about the SEP too is it's not included when you're looking at 401k contributions. So I've actually done this with a couple of clients where, and whether or not this would fit you is totally up to your own circumstances. So if you were interested in this, we'd have to evaluate your situation. But some people will have a good steady paying W-2 job, and then they'll have a side hustle that's generating income. So they'll contribute monies to their 401k at their W-2 job through that. And then any money from the side made from the side hustle goes toward the SEP IRA.
Yeah.
So there's definitely options. And you normally want to consider that if you can put away more money than you could in just a traditional or a Roth IRA. But that's just kind of like a real life example of how a SEP might get, attributed into a plan.
Yeah, and you can get real cheeky and throw in cash balance pension plans. We've talked about that in the past.
Yeah.
You can get real cheeky with it. If this is too basic for you, then definitely reach out to a financial advisor.
Yeah. And I would just say in general, if you have questions, I've said it too many times before, but stay away from Google on some of this stuff. There's bad advice on the internet out there. It's not correct. It's not up to date. It hasn't taken into consideration new legislation that's just passed, which alters a lot of this stuff.
Yep.
Is if you're in a situation where you don't recognize or understand which account you're working with, how it works, or if you're transitioning to a different type of plan construction, reach out to an advisor and just ask them if you they can help kind of walk you through what the differences are, because this has to deal with your retirement. And for probably 100% of people listening to this, retirement is a pretty important deal,
Yep.
and making sure that you're doing things correctly is super important.
And the last thing I'd emphasize, even though I already said it, you have to have earned income. If you are a business owner, you have to pay yourself a salary, because I've ran into this.
Yeah, yeah, for
No
sure.
fun walking it back.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for today. So kind of the gist of the conversation is just recognizing that the account is the placeholder. It's the all-seeing place where all the investments that you actually invest your contributions into, and the differences that we walk through between an individual retirement account, a 401k, a simple IRA, and a SEP IRA. Just recognizing those differences as you go throughout your career. It's super important. If you have questions, please reach out. And we look forward to next week's episode. Thanks so much, guys.